Hey, this is Dr. Jen of the House Call Practice. Thanks so much for hopping on and joining me on this video today. The reason why I want to shoot this video is I want to be able to help you create a really awesome dose of clarity for yourself and really help determine if the house call model is something that is going to be a good fit for you. And so what I want to do is I want to answer the question, will house calls work for me if? And one of the biggest things that I've seen is that when I hear from a lot of health and wellness professionals who love the idea of house calls, they're interested in the idea of house calls, and they're thinking, I think this is going to be a good fit for me, all of the ifs and ands questions start to show up, right? And what I tend to find is that the if questions that show up pop up in a couple of different categories. So what I want to do in this video is break down for you what those categories are and how to help you best find clarity in them so that by the end of this video, you're going to know, okay, house calls will work for me if, and you're going to have better answers to that. And I'll tell you, when I started my house call practice back in 2009, I had a lot of if questions. I knew that I wanted to spend more time with my patients. I knew that the way I was practicing in the high volume rat race, I knew it wasn't working for me. But I still had those questions. Will it work for me if I'm living in a city? Will it work for me if I want to do X? Will it work for me if I want to offer these services? All of these questions popped into my head. And a lot of times what I'll find is that sometimes the more specific questions will get in the way and not necessarily thinking about some of the bigger vision things that I think are actually the most important things to consider when it comes to house calls and how to answer that question. So here's how I want to break this down and looking at this idea of, will house calls work for me? There are four key areas that I tend to look at where people ask these questions. And as I break down these different categories, I want you to ask yourself, how does this relate to me? How would I answer that question? What is my philosophy and my take on this? And the first thing that I'm going to point out is this. One of the biggest questions I'll get asked is, will house calls work for me if I'm in X profession, right? If I'm a chiropractor, or what if I'm a psychiatrist, or what if I'm a physical therapist? I'll get a lot of different health and wellness professionals asking me and wondering, well, this all sounds great, but will house calls work for me if I'm in this type of specific profession? And here's the best way I could answer this question. House calls are actually incredibly universal in the fact that whatever type of service or discipline or offerings that you have, if you're going to be coming, or if you want to actually provide your care and your services to your patients, if you want to be able to provide a different level of care and service to your patients, that is universal across the board. And what's actually really cool too, from even a equipment and logistics standpoint, is that there are so many more things now that are mobile and portable, and makes it very easy for you to actually bring your services and your care on site. So this model isn't profession specific. So my experience has been as a chiropractor, but I've seen this work in lots of different health professionals, and it's not because of the specific profession that you're in. What this is really about is the type of practice that you want. What is the type of practice that you want to create? And the first thing I would ask yourself is this. Do you want to have a different style and pace of practice? Do you want to have a practice where you can work at a lower pace, where you don't want to have to deal with all the pressures and stresses of a typical practice, where you don't want to maybe spend thousands of dollars running a practice and dealing with all of this infrastructure and space and equipment and staff and employees? Or maybe you just want to break out of the monotony of a practice because you're looking for something different. You want to get out of the four walls. You want to change up your routine. Now, regardless of what health professional you're in, the common way to practice is going to be in that in-office setting. So if you're already scratching to leave the nest and do something completely different, that is one of the ways that house calls is going to work for you. House calls naturally attract a provider that wants to practice at a different pace. Now, can you have a high volume practice with house calls? Sure, you can. You can do it in a couple of different ways. You can see multiple people in one sitting. You can see people at an office. But more often than not with house calls, it's a slower pace. So whether you're an MD, a DC, a PT, a massage therapist, whatever the initials are behind you, if you know that you want to practice at a different pace, house calls will work for you because they will give you a different way to practice without the pressure, without the stress, without the financial investment, without the need to have to churn and burn through a high volume of patients. And anyone who asks me that question, I always throw it back to you in terms of what is your practice philosophy. If your practice philosophy is I want to practice at a slower pace, then house calls make the most sense because it takes away all of those stresses and it allows you to focus on your goals as the provider and not get so lost in the practice in and of itself. The second thing that I then see is, will house calls work for me if I want to provide X, if I want to provide this type of care or this type of service or this type of treatment? And going back to what I just said, the first thing I would say is this. Almost every single treatment and option that I've seen can either be outsourced or provided in a mobile way and brought to the patients or clients in your area. So regardless, again, of the type of service or treatments or things that you want to provide and bring on site, there are a lot more mobile, on-site, outsourced, virtual ways to incorporate all of those things into your house call practice. But the biggest thing that I would ask yourself is this. House calls are going to work for you, especially if you want to spend more time with your patients. If you want to be able to actually provide a different level of care and service and attention and TLC to your patients. Now, I already addressed this a little bit in the first one, but the reason why I bring this up again is this, is that if you are a provider that feels like you are craving a way to practice and you feel starved for time or feel like you can't give your patients enough of the time and attention that you've been wanting to provide because you're caught up in all the pressures of a typical practice, and if you're asking yourself, I wish I had another way, or I wish I could find another way to practice where I could be at a slower pace, where I could serve the people in my community more, where I could offer more time, more care, where I'm not constantly staring at the watch because I know my waiting room is full of patients. Again, we're going back to philosophy here. If your philosophy is that you want to spend more time, whether that's going from a 30-minute massage to a 60-minute massage, or a 5-minute general wellness check if you're a doctor to a 10-minute wellness checkup, if you want to provide a higher level of care and service, house calls are going to work for you because that model, this model of care is primed for that. Everything about house calls is to attract the providers who want to do something completely different, regardless of your profession, regardless of the type of care or services that you provide. And with that comes the third thing. One of the biggest things that I also get the question of, will house calls work for me, is when it comes down to cash or insurance. So profit. How do you make profit in your practice? Now, in my own experience with my own house call practice, I did it as 100% cash. And the reason why I did it as 100% cash is that I personally didn't want to deal with the red tape of insurance. I left a practice that dealt with the red tape of insurance. There were 4 of us doctors on staff, and they had 3 people on insurance to manage all of the claims. And despite all of that effort, we still had to deal with delayed claims, delayed reimbursements, reimbursements that were a fraction of the dollar that we actually charge per appointment. And I realized, gosh, this doesn't make any sense at all to do this. So for me personally, and a lot of what I advocate is a cash practice because it is simpler, streamlined. You don't have to deal with a lot of the elements that an insurance practice is going to require. But looking at this bigger picture, whether you are insurance-based, you really want to look at is not the type of practice from a profit, monetary reimbursement standpoint. What you really want to look at is, do you believe that your services are worth more? Do you want to be able to charge more for your care? Do you want to be able to provide more time, more care, more services? Do you want to provide a level of convenience that you've never been able to provide for your patients? A different level of service that you've never been able to provide with your patients? If that's something that you want to be able to provide, then what I would really consider doing is looking at the house call model, because house calls are going to give you the ability to actually be able to charge more for your services, which means you can make more per appointment, which means you can provide a higher level of care for your patients, provide a higher quality of care to the people in your community, and make more in your practice as a result. So whether you're doing that as a fee for service and you're charging more per appointment as cash, or you're doing it as insurance and you're submitting more to the insurance companies because of the additional level of time and care and services and codes that you're going to be adding to your appointments, it's going to work for either of those models. You can absolutely choose either. And if you're comfortable in the insurance world, you can transition easily over into that. But if you come from the insurance world and you'd really like to streamline it, then cash is going to be a no-brainer with house calls because of what's next. And the fourth question is this: will house calls work for me in my community, in my area? And I've had people ask me this question all the way from the United Kingdom to people who work in the rural farmlands of the UK, to Amish countries in the US, to downtown Manhattan in New York City, right? So I've had this question asked from all different gamuts. And the concern is, well, will house calls work in a city because of XYZ, but will house calls work in a rural area because of XYZ? And I completely get these questions. So here's how I would look at this. Regardless of the zip code, regardless of where you live, people more and more, regardless of where they live, are looking for more convenient options to access the care and the services that they want to be able to bring into their life. Because you got to remember, people's lives are getting busier. more hectic, more crazy. They're trying to jam more and more things and priorities into their lives. It's why more people are dealing with stress and burnout as a whole, not just in the health industry, but people as a whole, right? We're trying to balance so many different things in our lives, which is why a lot of businesses outside of the health and wellness industry are thinking of, how can I provide an easier solution for people to access what I offer? Providing virtual access, faster deliveries, mobile services that are now coming on site. Almost every other industry now is tapping into more convenient ways for people to access goods, products, and services. But the industry that isn't doing this is the health and wellness industry, which is why I'm such an advocate of house calls, because this can give you the opportunity to tap into the one thing that people now across the world are looking for, and that's convenience. They're looking for a more convenient option, and that doesn't matter whether they live in the country or the city. If they can have a more convenient option where you as a provider can bring your care to them, bring your services to them, provide them a different level of care, provide them more time, show up at their doorstep while they're in their PJs, they don't have to rearrange their schedules or pack up their children or put off their meetings. You can be in the comfort of their home or their office or wherever they are. You better believe that they're going to be interested in that. And what's really great about this too is that house calls are making a resurgence because of this reason, because people are looking for a more convenient option. But this also puts you in the driver's seat, because you'll find that the people in your area probably don't even know that house calls are an option for the type of care or services that you provide. And it's because a lot of providers don't even know it's an option themselves or aren't using this themselves, and they have a very typical in-office model. This gives you a massive, massive advantage, because you have the opportunity that regardless of the area that you live in, to make your practice stand up, because you're providing a level of care and convenience. And when you communicate that to the people in their area, in your area, they're going to think, what? You provide house calls? You really come to me? Is this actually what we're doing? You're going to actually blow them away by the level of value and care that you're actually going to be offering. And so as you're looking at this from all of the maybe logistic questions, or looking at your situation and thinking about, what does this look like for me? Here are the main questions that I want you to ask yourself. When you look at this question, will house calls work for me if? Am I the type of provider that wants to be able to practice at a slower pace with less stress and less financial risk? If that's a yes, then house calls will work for you, because we're going to strip away almost all of your startup costs, and we're going to strip away almost all of your overhead. So you won't have the financial pressure, and you can practice at a slower pace. The second question is, will house calls work for me if I'm this type of professional, if I want to provide this type of service or this type of care, or provide longer appointments? If you're the type of provider that feels cheated in your practice and feel like you're cheating your patients or clients out of providing them a level of care and service that you aren't able to now for whatever reason, maybe you're working in a high volume practice or you currently have one of your own. If that's what you want to provide, house calls are designed for you, because they give you that freedom to be able to provide more time, more care, more service, and a lot more TLC to the people in your community. So that's the second question. And the third question then is profit. How do I want to make profit in my practice? Do you want to make profit where you can actually make more per appointment and provide a higher quality of care? Or would you rather focus on a higher quantity of appointments in a shorter period of time and you're charging less? Both can work. What I'll oftentimes find is people who are attracted to house calls, my peers, colleagues like you, is that you're looking for something different. You actually want to provide a different experience, and you know that by providing a different experience, you're actually worth it. You're worth more, and you want to charge more for it. So if you want to increase the profitability in your practice while providing really exquisite care for the people in your community, that's a good indication that house calls are for you. And the fourth thing that I would look at it is this, from like a 30,000 foot view, right? Is your passion for what you do. If your passion is taking you in a direction where you know that you want to focus more on the very reason why you became the professional that you are in the first place, and not get lost in the stressors and the business management and all of those things that we're told that we have to do in a typical practice model, and you want to simplify this thing and you want to make it easy and streamlined and financially more savvy and more focused on your care and what you do best, again, regardless of the profession you're in, regardless of the location that you're in, and you know that you would want to provide a higher level of care and service to your patients, that's a good sign that house calls are for you. So as you're looking at this and looking at these four areas, you can see how they kind of interlap with each other, right? This is really at looking at things from a philosophical standpoint. And I love addressing this question. I wanted to address this question from all these different areas, because what I tend to find is that if you can hone in on your philosophy of how you want to practice, and how you want to provide your care and how you want to make your money. And the more you laser in on that, that's going to give you the clarity that, you know what, this model makes a lot of sense for me, or you know what, I actually do want the complete opposite of that. Maybe this isn't the best fit. Odds are that if you're watching this video, you want something completely different. So I hope this gives you a lot of clarity, because a lot of times what I'll find is that the first question is, will this work for me? What about this? What about this, right? And then the next question is, okay, this does work for me. How am I going to do that? What does that actually look like? What can I do step by step? That's where I can come in, and that's where I can come in. I can help you with that, and I can share with you more details about how I can help you do that specifically. But we have to start with your core first. We have to start with you making sure that that is a yes for you first, that this makes sense for you first, that this is going to allow you to tap into your passion and how you want to provide care for your patients on a deeper level. And if that is a yes for you, then let's have an awesome journey, and let's actually do this, and let's actually get you going on this momentum, pull you out of a practice model that's not working for you, again, regardless of profession, the industry, the type of care you want to provide, or location you're in, and give you some clarity so you can start to get this momentum going to break away from where you're stuck right now and bridge that gap to get you to where you want to go. So I hope this helped give you a lot of awesome clarity on this really big question that I get all the time on, well, house calls work for me if, and I hope that for you, it's a resounding yes, if that's right for you. And I hope if at minimum for you, it's giving you a lot more clarity to realize, I now know what makes sense. I now know that this could be a good fit for me. I now know the direction that I want my life and my practice to go in, so we can start to take some massive action and get you to take some momentum to put this plan in place and to help recreate and reinvent the way that you practice and provide the care for the people in your community. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully this helped address that question for you of, will house calls work for you? And I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Again, I'm Dr. Jen of the House Call Practice. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching. Take a second to like this video and then subscribe to House Call Practice so you can get the latest episodes, and also helping other freedom-seeking health professionals like you learn how to build a practice where you can work less, make more, and break away from the high volume grind. I'm Dr. Jen, and I'll see you next time.